Alyssa sat at the long glass dining table, trying to ignore how out of place she felt. Everything about Daniel's parents' house gleamed. The silverware, the chandelier, even the polite laughter of people who seemed born to this world of quiet wealth. Alyssa smoothed her dress and offered a small smile as the waiter poured more wine. Margaret, Daniel's mother, had barely looked at her all evening, except to ask short, cold questions. "Where did you grow up? What do your parents do?" Alyssa answered politely, but she could feel the judgment hiding behind every word. Daniel sat beside her, tense, his hand brushing hers under the table as if to say, "Just get through this." When dessert arrived, Margaret set down her fork with a sharp little click. "Daniel," she said sweetly, "you always had such fine taste. I'm just surprised." The room went quiet. Alyssa's chest tightened. "Surprised?" she asked carefully. Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes. I thought you'd choose someone more suited to our family." "Not." She waved her hand like she was brushing away something unpleasant. "Street trash." The word landed like a slap. Alyssa froze, heat rushing to her face. For a moment no one spoke, not even Daniel. Her first instinct was to laugh it off, pretend it didn't sting. But it did. It burned. She glanced at Daniel, waiting, begging, for him to say something, anything. His lips parted then closed again. He looked down at his plate. "Excuse me," Alyssa whispered, pushing back her chair. Her legs felt unsteady as she walked out of the room, hearing the soft scrape of silverware starting again as if nothing had happened. In the hallway, she gripped her phone and stared at her reflection in a gold-framed mirror. "Street trash." The words echoed in her head like poison. Behind her, laughter floated from the dining room. Polite, practiced laughter that didn't belong to her world. Alyssa's chest rose and fell. She told herself not to cry, not here. But her hands trembled. More than Margaret's insult, what hurt most was Daniel's silence. Would he defend her later? Or was this who he really was, a man too scared to stand up to his mother? She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress again, and walked out the front door without saying goodbye. The night air was cold, but at least it was honest. Grew up in a working-class single-mother household, Alyssa learned early what it meant to fight for every little thing. Her mother worked long hours as a nurse's aide, coming home late at night with tired eyes but still managing a smile. Money was always tight, but love was never missing. Alyssa promised herself she would build a better life, not just for her, but for her mom too. She worked hard in school, staying up late to finish homework after helping her mother with chores. Now in law school, she juggled 2 part-time jobs, tutoring high school students in the afternoon and waiting tables on weekends. Every textbook she bought, every rent payment she made, came from her own effort. She was proud of that. Daniel's world was nothing like hers. He grew up in a house where the floors shined like mirrors, where drivers waited outside and dinner parties sparkled with laughter from people wearing pearls and silk. His mother, Margaret, cared about appearances more than anything. She often said things like, "Our family has a name to protect." His father stayed quiet during these speeches, always choosing peace over argument, no matter what it cost. Daniel had never wanted for anything. But he wasn't arrogant. That was what Alyssa loved about him. They met in college at a study group. Alyssa remembered spilling coffee on her notes and watching Daniel quietly tear pages from his own notebook to help her rewrite them. He was kind, funny, and so different from the rich boys who flaunted their money. Opposites attracted quickly, and soon they were inseparable. Yet even in those early days, Alyssa felt a shadow over their love. Margaret's polite smiles during their first meetings were too tight, her questions too sharp. "What does your mother do?" she had asked once, her voice sweet but cold. When Alyssa answered honestly, she noticed the way Margaret's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly, a silent judgment. Daniel always told her to ignore it. "She just needs time," he would say. "Once she sees how amazing you are, she'll love you like I do." Alyssa wanted to believe him. She really did. But deep inside she worried. She knew Daniel hated conflict. When professors were unfair in class, he stayed quiet. When his friends made rude jokes, he laughed along instead of calling them out. And when Margaret made sly comments about Alyssa's background, Daniel would squeeze her hand under the table, but say nothing out loud. Now, after months of dating, Daniel had started talking about marriage. Alyssa loved him. There was no doubt about that. But she couldn't shake the question echoing in her mind. If his mother stood in the way, would he fight for me? She feared the answer. Love, she knew, was powerful. But love without respect, love without someone willing to stand up for you, could feel very small. After the dinner insult, Alyssa left the table early, her chest tight and her eyes burning. She waited outside near the driveway, trying to calm herself before Daniel came out. She could still hear voices from inside, the low hum of expensive laughter mixed with the clinking of dishes. Then Margaret's voice carried sharply through the open window of the sitting room. "If you marry her, you'll throw away your future," Margaret said. "She'll never be more than street trash." Alyssa froze. Every word sliced deep, sharper than the first insult. She held her breath, waiting for Daniel to defend her, to tell his mother she was wrong. But he didn't. There was a pause, and Alyssa strained to hear. Daniel didn't raise his voice, didn't say, "Don't you dare talk about her like that." Instead, he gave an awkward laugh. "Mom, let's not do this right now," he murmured. "It's late and people can hear." He quickly changed the subject to something about a family trip, as if her worth could be brushed aside like an unwanted topic. Alyssa's heart sank. The night air felt cold against her skin, but the chill inside her chest was worse. It wasn't just Margaret's words. Alyssa had grown up hearing judgment from strangers before. What crushed her was Daniel's silence. When he finally came out to find her, his face looked worried but not angry. "Alyssa, I'm sorry about dinner," he said, reaching for her hand. "You know how my mom can be. I'll talk to her, I promise." But Alyssa could still hear his voice from minutes ago, calm, almost nervous, doing anything but defending her. She gently pulled her hand away. "Will you really talk to her? Or will you just try to keep the peace again?" she asked softly. Daniel hesitated. I just didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone." Alyssa nodded slowly, but inside her decision was forming. She loved Daniel, but she couldn't marry a man who stayed silent when she was insulted. Love without respect would break her in the long run. 2 days later, Daniel excitedly told her he had planned to announce their engagement at a small gathering with friends. He even showed her the ring again, smiling nervously. Alyssa looked at it, her throat tight. "I can't do this," she whispered. Daniel's smile faded. "What do you mean?" "Alyssa, I told you I'd fix things." She shook her head. "This isn't about fixing your mother. It's about you. If you won't stand up to her now, you never will. I won't spend my life waiting for you to choose me." Daniel stared at her like she had just spoken another language. "You're throwing this away?" "No," Alyssa said quietly, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm saving myself." That night, she texted the friends who were supposed to attend the engagement announcement. Plans canceled. Sorry for the change. Then she put her phone face down and sat in silence, letting the truth settle. She wasn't just walking away from a party. She was walking away from the dream of a life with Daniel, and from the idea that love alone was enough. He begs Alyssa to reconsider, standing outside her small apartment with flowers in his hand and panic in his voice. "Please, Alyssa, don't do this," Daniel said, his words tumbling out fast. "I'll talk to my mom. I'll fix it. I swear I'll make her respect you." Alyssa looked at him through tired eyes. "You've said that before," she whispered. "I mean it this time." He reached for her hand, but she didn't take it. His promises sounded good, but they felt like smoke, easy to see, impossible to hold. In the days that followed, Daniel tried harder. He called her constantly, showed up at her law school with coffee, and even took her out to dinner at her favorite cheap diner instead of his usual fancy spots. He wanted to prove he loved her, and Alyssa didn't doubt that he did. But every time his phone buzzed and she saw his mother's name flash on the screen, he went pale. He still answered every call, still spoke in a low, obedient voice. Meanwhile, Margaret began her own quiet war. In whispered conversations at charity events and brunches, she told anyone who would listen that Alyssa was only after Daniel's money. "She's clever," Margaret would say with a knowing smile, "working her way into the family. But I won't let my son be tricked." Soon, the rumors spread through Daniel's circle of wealthy friends. Alyssa noticed how some of them stopped inviting her to gatherings. A few gave her polite, tight smiles, the kind people give when they believe gossip but are too cowardly to say it aloud. Alyssa refused to crumble. Instead, she leaned on people who truly cared for her. Her mother reminded her how far she had come on her own. "You're more than enough, Alyssa," she said firmly, wrapping her daughter in a warm hug. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Her law school friends, who had seen her balancing long shifts and heavy textbooks, laughed at the idea that she needed anyone's money. Slowly, Alyssa began to see her own worth more clearly. She realized she wasn't just fighting Margaret, she was fighting Daniel's fear of losing his mother's approval. Every time he promised to confront Margaret, something stopped him. One evening, Alyssa asked, "Did you talk to her yet?" Daniel looked away and muttered, "Not yet. The timing wasn't right." "Daniel," Alyssa said softly, "there's never going to be a right time. You just have to do it." "I will," he insisted, but the words rang hollow. Their love started to feel heavy, like carrying a beautiful vase full of cracks. Alyssa still loved his laugh, still melted when he brushed a strand of hair from her face, but there was always a shadow between them. Margaret's voice calling her street trash, and Daniel's silence. Late at night, Alyssa lay awake wondering if this was what the rest of her life would feel like. Would she spend years being polite while Margaret insulted her? Would she always have to fight for Daniel's loyalty? The thought made her chest ache. Daniel, for his part, seemed torn in two. He showed up with gifts, swore he would never lose her, but when his mother summoned him to another charity luncheon, he went without question. When Margaret openly insulted Alyssa again, calling her unsuitable, during a phone call Daniel didn't know Alyssa could hear, Daniel told Alyssa to ignore it. "Ignore it?" Alyssa asked, her voice shaking. "Do you even hear what she says about me?" "I just don't want to make things worse," Daniel said. "They're already worse," Alyssa replied. Their arguments grew sharper, but beneath the anger was sadness. Alyssa loved Daniel deeply, but each day showed her more clearly that he was unwilling, or unable, to break free from his mother's control. The relationship, once full of laughter and late-night study dates, now felt like a constant test of her dignity. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Would Daniel ever choose her fully, or would he always remain his mother's obedient son? Alyssa confronts Margaret at another family gathering. This time she is done with being quiet. The long dining table is covered in crystal glasses and perfect silverware, but the air feels heavy. Margaret sits at the head of the table, giving Alyssa sharp glances as if daring her to speak. Daniel looks nervous, tapping his fingers against his wine glass. Relatives chatter, pretending not to feel the tension. Margaret strikes first. "Daniel," she says in a voice that carries down the table, "I do hope you've come to your senses. Some women just don't belong in certain families." Alyssa sets down her fork and looks Margaret straight in the eye. "You've been calling me trash since the day you met me," she says calmly, her voice steady. "But trash doesn't raise daughters who become lawyers." The room falls silent. Someone drops a spoon, and it clatters on the floor. Daniel freezes, caught between pride for Alyssa's courage and fear of his mother's wrath. Margaret's lips curl into a cold smile. "Oh, you have a sharp tongue," she says. "But sharp tongues don't build legacies. Daniel, if you love this girl, then prove it. Walk away from this family's name. Walk away from everything we've built." All eyes turn to Daniel. His face pales, his breathing shallow. Alyssa watches him, praying he will finally stand up for her. "Daniel," she says softly, "what do you choose?" Daniel swallows hard. His eyes dart from Alyssa to his mother, then back to Alyssa. He opens his mouth, but no words come. Just hesitation. Just fear. And that hesitation is Alyssa's answer. Her heart aches, but her voice stays calm. "I see now," she whispers. She reaches into her purse and pulls out the ring he gave her. Slowly, she sets it on the polished table. The sound of the metal against the wood is louder than anything. Gasps ripple around the room. Daniel jumps to his feet. "Alyssa, wait please. I just need more time." "No," Alyssa says firmly, her eyes bright with tears she refuses to shed. "I don't need more time to know what you just showed me." She stands, smoothing her dress with steady hands, and looks straight at Margaret. "You win," Alyssa says. "But it's not really a win when the cost is your own son's happiness." Margaret says nothing, but her tight smile flickers for just a moment. Daniel looks shattered, reaching for Alyssa's hand, but she steps back. "I won't beg for a place in this family," Alyssa says softly. "I deserve to be chosen without question." Then she walks out, heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving the stunned room, and the man she loves, behind. She pours herself into law school, graduates with honors, and earns a clerkship at a prestigious law firm. Instead of crying over Daniel, Alyssa spends late nights in the library, pushing herself harder than ever. Every insult, every moment of silence from Daniel, becomes fuel to prove that she is worth far more than Margaret ever believed. The day she walks across the graduation stage, wearing her cap and gown, her mother cheers the loudest from the front row. Alyssa feels a deep sense of pride, not just for the diploma in her hand, but for everything it represents. She didn't just survive heartbreak, she built a future with her own strength. Meanwhile, Margaret's perfect world begins to crack. Word spreads through their wealthy circle that Daniel's relationship ended because his mother drove Alyssa away. People whisper at dinner parties, "Did you hear what Margaret said to that girl? No wonder Daniel's still single." Margaret's sharp tongue now hurts her own reputation. Daniel feels the loss most of all. He calls Alyssa a few times, leaving messages that grow sadder each week. "I'm sorry," he says in one voicemail. "I was scared. I should have stood up for you." But Alyssa never calls back. She knows his apology comes too late. While Daniel struggles with regret, Alyssa begins to thrive. Her new job at the law firm challenges her, but she meets people who respect her talent and drive. For the first time in a long while, she feels completely free. No one is judging her clothes, her accent, or her mother's job. She even starts dating again, slowly, carefully. The men she meets aren't perfect, but they treat her like an equal, not someone to be approved by a family name. Alyssa learns to look for character, not charm. One evening, she sits in a quiet cafe with her mother, sipping coffee. "Do you ever miss him?" her mother asks gently. Alyssa smiles a little. "I loved him, but I love myself more now." Her mother squeezes her hand, pride shining in her eyes. "That's my girl." Alyssa realizes she doesn't need Daniel, his money, or his family's approval to feel complete. She has her education, her career, her mother's love, and a future she built on her own terms. Alyssa sits at her graduation, the bright sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the auditorium. She can hear the clapping and cheering all around her, but the loudest cheer comes from the front row, where her mother sits smiling, tears of pride shining in her eyes. For a moment, Alyssa closes her eyes and lets the sound wash over her. She remembers the nights she stayed up late, reading law books by the dim light of her desk lamp. She remembers the long shifts at the diner, the exams she passed while exhausted, and the times she felt small when Daniel's mother sneered at her. Street trash. The words used to sting like fire, leaving scars she thought she might never forget. But now, sitting here in her cap and gown, Alyssa feels something else. Strength. Every insult, every moment of doubt, every sleepless night, it all brought her here. She smiles quietly to herself, thinking, "They called me trash, but I built a life no one can throw away." She glances at her mother again. "We did it, Mom," she whispers, and her mother reaches out, squeezing her hand tightly. "Yes, baby, we did. And I am so proud of you." Alyssa thinks about Daniel one last time. She feels no bitterness, no need for revenge. She knows he lost her because he could not stand up for her, because he let fear of his mother guide every choice. It hurts a little, but mostly it reminds her of how far she has come. She doesn't need him anymore. She doesn't need anyone to validate her worth. The dean calls her name. Alyssa walks across the stage, each step confident, her heart steady. She accepts her diploma, shaking hands with professors who recognize her effort, her persistence, and her talent. The applause that follows feels different from the whispers of judgment she endured before. This time, it is real, earned, and lasting. Back in her seat, Alyssa sits tall, feeling an unshakable sense of self-worth. The world is full of challenges, she knows, but she is ready. She has built her life from her own strength, and nothing, no cruel word, no wealthy mother's disapproval, can take that away. As the ceremony ends and graduates toss their caps into the air, Alyssa looks at the sky through the tall windows, imagining the limitless possibilities ahead. She smiles. This is her life, her choice, and her victory. And for the first time, she knows that respect, love, and success will always start with herself. Her mother wraps her in a tight hug as they leave the auditorium together. Alyssa leans against her, thinking that this moment, this quiet victory, is sweeter than any ring, any approval, any promise she could have received from anyone else. She feels free, proud, and unstoppable. And with that, Alyssa steps forward into her future, ready to face it on her own terms. Hey friends, thanks for sticking around till the end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. See you next time.